Hello and welcome to my video all about how to make a spiky cast on edge. You can use any yarn for this, but just bear in mind that the thicker the yarn, the bigger the spike shapes are going to be. I'm going to be using DK yarn or double knit yarn, which is basically medium weight yarn. Okay, so the first step is to tie a slip knot onto one of your needles. You then need to do a KFB, which is a single increase. KFB stands for knit into the front and the back, and that's exactly what we're going to do. You'll need to do all the normal steps of a knit stitch, except at the end you don't push the stitch off the end of the needle. Instead, you take the right hand needle point to the back and take it down through the same stitch. And then you just complete this stitch as you would a normal knit stitch. As you can see, you've now made one stitch into two. If you'd like to see a slower demo of the KFB, I have a separate video on my channel. Then for the next row, you purl 2 stitches. If you'd prefer to make garter stitch spikes instead of stockinette stitch spikes, then you would knit on the wrong side instead. So at this point you would knit 2 rather than purl 2. Then for the next row, you're going to do 2 KFB increases. So do the usual steps of a knit stitch, except don't push the stitch off the end of the needle. Take the right hand needle point to the back and take it down through the back of that same stitch. Then complete the stitch just like you would a normal knit stitch. And then do one more KFB. So knit into the front of the stitch and then into the back of the stitch. Then for the next row, you need to do 4 purl stitches. Or if you're doing garter stitch spikes, you need to do 4 knit stitches. You then need to cut the working yarn to leave you with a yarn tail at least 6 inches long. You can then push this spike down the needle to keep it out of your way. And you simply repeat this pattern for every spike that you want to knit. So tie a slip knot onto your needle and do 1 KFB. So knit into the front and the back of that stitch. When you're doing this, just make sure that the right side of the previous spike is facing you. Then for the next row, you purl 2. And then on the next row, you do 2 KFBs. So knit into the front, then the back, and knit into the front and the back. And then lastly, you purl 4. Then cut the yarn to leave you with at least 6 inches. And push this spike out of the way. And now I'm just going to knit one last spike. So tie a slip knot onto your needle and then do 1 KFB. Then 2 purl stitches, 2 KFBs, and 4 purl stitches. This time though, because it's the last spike, make sure you don't cut the yarn. Instead, you need to bunch up all of those spike shapes and knit all across the row, across all 3 spikes. So in my case, I need to knit 12 stitches. Just ignore the fact that they're separate shapes. Then, like me, you can just carry on with stockinette stitch, or you can just start whatever project you're knitting. And then all that's left to do is to weave in those yarn tail ends. As you can see, I've woven all of them in except for one, which I'm just going to do now. So feed the yarn tail into a tapestry needle or a yarn needle, and then just weave it into the back of your work. Just try and follow the path of the yarn already in the knitting. Make sure you don't pull this tight because you don't want to distort the spike shapes. And that's it, that's how you make a spiky cast on edge. As you can see, I also did a sample in a super bulky yarn, and this makes larger spike shapes. I really hope you found this video helpful, and thank you very much for watching.